So, what's the plan?
I'm just gonna one picture where call you up. Everything around was like, you can always see through that. But one time it was like all black, approximately night or so there. And
Or in my focused on
yeah, just when you're
If I go to Bruce,
sounds good. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. How are you doing now? Good. You're doing well? Are you excited? Yeah. Good. So we have our Uncle Jim Cowie here with us. He's going to talk to us about the USA and you in Bible prophecy. So that's kind of fun. We've been announcing it as the USA in Bible prophecy. We also have the additional and you. Check that out. All right. So what we will do is we will open up with a prayer and then call up Uncle Jim. Glorious Father, we look unto you now in thankfulness that you've brought us here, thankfulness for the lives that we have, for the hope that we have through your Son, for your word, for your truth that allows us to approach unto you and to know you. We recognize that this really is such a great privilege, and it is our prayer now that as we think on these things, that we will be lifted up, and that we will be able to set our mind on things that are good, that are right, that are lovely. May you be here with us, and may you guide us in all of these things. We pray for your Son to come. We know that he will be here soon, and so we ask that by your grace we might see him shortly, and that we might be allowed to serve him and be with you forever. We ask this now in his name. Amen. All right.
Oh, I left my computer. I left my computer.
So, young people, where do you think I got this hat from? Texas, yes. So you think that if I wear a Texas hat in this room that I'm going to say flattering things about the United States of America? Well, I'm not, so I'm taking it off. Okay? I'm going to say some rather unflattering things about America in this talk today. Well, I'm also going to talk about you as we get to the end of this talk this morning. The fundamental principle we're going to use in this talk is that which you know well in Daniel 4:17. This matters by the decree of the watchers and the demand by the word of the holy ones to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, gives it to whomsoever he pleases. Now, of course, the activity of the angels, young people, in guiding and directing the affairs of nations and putting men and women in place in power would be useless to those who are dead. That's why it says here, to the intent that the living may know. So what we see going on around us in the fulfillment of Bible prophecy is designed for you and me who are alive and well, and who can respond to that. Those who are lying in the cemetery down the road don't know anything about it. It's no good to them. So that's why we need to have a look at Bible prophecy and see the hand of our God at work through the angels. Now, if you were there last night at Reseda, I spoke about the coming depression, and I'm not the only one talking about that. In fact, those who know what's going on in our world know that the world is about to be struck by the greatest depression in human history. It will make the one in the 1930s look like a Sunday school picnic by comparison. This is Christine Lagarde. She's the head of the International Monetary Fund. In December 2011, she said this: if the international community doesn't work together, the risk from an economic point of view is that of retraction, rising protectionism, isolation. This is exactly the description of what happened in the 1930s, and what followed, which of course was World War II, is something we're not looking forward to. Well, of course they're not looking forward to it, but of course they're going to get something like that. It's going to happen again. There is going to be another world war. It's called Armageddon, and it's going to be resolved, of course, by the intervention of our Lord Jesus Christ and the saints. So what might bring the collapse? Well, the US dollar is going to collapse eventually because of the quantitative easing. They're in the fourth round of that. That means printing money, just putting zeros on your bank balance, but nothing to back it up. That doesn't last for very long. They'll be doing it for 2.5 years, and that really is very generous, because normally after 2 years, countries have their currency collapse. So the dollar is in the process of collapsing. Well, OPEC and other cartels are looking at the possibility, and Russia is deeply involved in this, of using something other than the US dollar for trading in oil and commodities. You see, there's all of these US dollars out there in the world. So the US Treasury's printed this money and put it out there because countries need it. They need it to trade in oil and other things. Well, there's a group of countries, and especially OPEC, who are saying the US dollar's going to collapse soon, so let's get out of it while we can. Let's send these US dollars back to the US Treasury, get our money back, and we'll use another currency for trading. That is likely to happen sometime, perhaps later this year, perhaps next year. The departure of Greece or similarly bankrupt countries in southern Europe could bring the crash, bringing down the European Central Bank, the ECB. Or it could be serious natural disasters, young people, disrupt world trade and the supply of food. You're living in California, aren't you? Well, they took a photograph from a satellite on January 30, 2013, and that was the snow that was on the Rocky Mountains. Now you need that to fill your dams. Well, that was a pretty poor, miserable snowfall. And this is the 3rd year of the drought in California. Now you can still turn a tap on and get water, but I wouldn't rely upon that for too long. Because this photo was taken in January 13, 2014. Look at the snow cover on the Rocky Mountains. That's why dams, like the one here in San Jose, notice I said it correctly, San Jose, is totally empty. And there are many dams like that in California, and I passed a few on my travels. Some of them are extremely low, and they're going to remain that way because you haven't had any rain and there's no snow to melt. On the Rocky Mountains, that could trigger a disaster because California actually has the 4th largest economy in the world. Yes, 4th largest in the world, and it produces a lot of stuff that goes into your shops, the vegetables and the fruit that you eat every day come largely from California. That is about to change. Some farmers in California are not pruning their trees because they know they're not going to be able to get any water to make the fruit grow. So why bother? Why put money and time and effort into something that's not going to happen? So you see, that could be one of the things that the angels use to trigger this crash. And here's another Californian. His name is John Carroll Williams. He is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco up the road. He serves on several federal committees. He's a world-renowned economist. He issues what he calls the Shadow Government Statistics Report quite frequently. His last one was January the 7th, 2014. There's 50 or 60 pages of charts and information as to why he comes to the conclusion that he does come to. That there is a 90% chance of a hyperinflationary Great Depression beginning in 2014. Now, people like that don't make statements like that. You can spook markets, you can make it very difficult for people. You do not make statements like that if you're in his position. You only do that when you know that's serious. And he's trying to warn the world, and especially the United States of America, that this depression is coming. And it's coming down the track like a steam train. And unless they do something about it, they're going to be bowled over by it. That's what he's saying. So it is coming, young people, no doubt about it. And that's exactly what we would expect. Because we know that the Lord Jesus Christ in Luke chapter 17 said that when he comes to take us away, he will come in days similar to the days of Noah and Lot. Now what was the thing? What was the common denominator in the days of Lot and Noah? Prosperity. Now, if I asked you what was the other problems in the days of Noah, you would say, well, immorality and violence. Christ mentions nothing about immorality or violence in Luke 17. If I was to ask you what the problem of Sodom was, you'd all know what the answer to that was, wouldn't you? He mentioned nothing about that. Not a word about the immorality of Sodom. He's only interested in one thing, and that was that in these eras of divine judgment, the common denominator was prosperity. And it lasted until the last day. And when Noah and his family were locked away in the ark, kaboom! All their prosperity disappeared in a week. When Lot and his family were taken out of Sodom, as the angels will come and take us to the judgment seat, kaboom! Next day, next morning, those who were going down to get their latte at the local coffee shop didn't make it. They were blown off the face of the earth. all of their prosperity disappear in a day. That's why they won't be interested why this hall is empty the morning after we're gone. They won't be interested why your house is empty, because they will be lining up at the banks to get their money out and there won't be any money to get. That's why we need to be on our guard, because the world is telling us that this huge depression is coming and it will destroy modern civilization as we know it. What were they doing? Well, they were eating and drinking. We eat and drink, don't we? He means restaurant type eating. He means pub, hotel type drinking. Marrying and giving in marriage. Jumping into one relationship and out of that into another one. Buying and selling and building and planting. You don't do those things in depressions. Ask my father. He grew up on bread and drip. That's why he's 3 inches shorter than me. All right, he's 5'11", because he grew up on food that you wouldn't eat. You wouldn't even touch it. Depression years. You don't do those things in depressions. And so you see, we're on the very cusp of great things, young people. We need to be ready for it. All their prosperity collapsed in a day when the saints were taken away. And last night we showed this chart of how depressions occurred. The stock market crash of 29 led to the depression, lasted 10 years, and there had to be a war to get out of it. The one that's coming is not that far away, it's overdue. There will be a 10-year time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation on earth, and there will be another world war, Armageddon. And that's going to see the establishment of the kingdom and human society totally different from what we know it today. So what will the crash trigger? International bankruptcy is going to force a lot of change on our world. Very radical change. Middle East peace will be achieved at last. So we don't need to see that from here. Most nations will have to abandon their foreign adventures, and that will leave room for Russia and other nations to expand their border, including Israel, which will take control of the West Bank. Complete realignment in Europe, as we spoke about last night. And 10 nations will emerge to fulfill Bible prophecy in the territory of the old Roman Empire to the south of the Danube and the Rhine. And Israel will remain relatively prosperous on the back of huge finds of oil and gas, and will thumb their nose at the rest of the world and become a target for Gog in due course. There's a prophecy that has to be fulfilled too, and is being fulfilled. It's Jeremiah 30, verses 12 to 14. For thus saith Yahweh, thy bruise is incurable, and thy wound is grievous. He's talking to Israel, his people. There is none to plead thy cause, that thou mayest be bound up. Thou hast no healing medicines. All thy lovers have forgotten thee, they seek thee not. For I wounded thee, he goes on to say. Well, that's happening. All of Israel's lovers are forsaking her. You see, Israel has a history of being hated by many nations and loved by others. And one of those nations that loved Israel for 50, 60, 70 years was the United States of America. It's not true today. I want to show you what's happening. Jeremiah 30 requires Israel to be forsaken by friends before Armageddon. Of the 175 United Nations Security Council resolutions, the 690 General Assembly resolutions passed before 1990, and that's 20-something years ago, 97 of the 175 and 429 of the 690 were directed against Israel, which was a member state. That shows you the attitude of some nations towards Israel. And the US protected Israel from 1947 onwards until recently. But Obama has shifted from that position. Other countries have also done the same. Turkey, for example. Even Australia went through a wobbly period in relation to Israel recently. But now we've got a right-wing conservative government, things have changed. So, what about America's relationship with Israel? Well, it goes right back to early days. President Lyndon B. Johnson, he became that, of course, on the assassination of Kennedy in '63. He spent $30,000 of his own money, which in the 1930s was a huge amount of money. It was Depression time, getting Jews out of Germany. That's why he eventually became president, in my view. Those that bless Israel will be blessed by God. And Harry Truman is another example of that. He was instrumental in gaining statehood for Israel back in 1947-48, and admission to the United Nations in 1949 for Israel. The US helped Israel win 3 wars. The Sinai Campaign of 1956, the Six-Day War of '67, and the Yom Kippur War 1973, where American involvement was crucial. Otherwise Israel would have been destroyed by the Arabs. Israel relied on US finance in the past, but now Israel does not need the US to prop it up anymore. The US can no longer afford it anyway. And under President Obama, US relations with Israel have sunk to their lowest level in modern history. That's going to lead to cursing. You curse Israel, you turn your back on Israel, history shows that you receive a curse. You bless Israel, you receive a blessing. That's why America has been so prosperous in the past, because it has been a supporter of Israel, but that's all changed. History shows that the principle of Genesis 12:3 works in the destiny of nations. And we know what that passage says. God says in the promise to Abraham, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And it's true. It's true across a wide range of factors in the dealings of nations. Vis-a-vis Israel, that proves to be true. So let's just step back in history, young people. It sounds like ancient history to you, but I was born just after these events. I probably look like it. Anyway, I was born just after these events. This is in 1945, just before the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt in April 1945, before the war had ended. The Big Three, as they called them, the brutal assassin and probably the killer of, one of the largest numbers of people in history, maybe 50, 60 million they attribute to Stalin in his time. Only Mao Zedong beat him. Mao Zedong got 70-odd million people and he brutally killed by his policies. You've got FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and you've got, of course, Winston Churchill, the Big Three. And they tried to put together an organisation that would prevent future world wars. The United Nations, of course, emerged from the League of Nations after the First World War. In 1947, the United Nations had 57 member states. Today it's got 192, and one of those, of course, is the nation of Israel. Israel became a nation state because the United Nations set out to do something about the problem of the Jews after World War II and the Holocaust and the destruction of 6 million Jews by Hitler and his crowd. And so they held hearings. And here we've got Chaim Weizmann appearing before the UN Committee for Palestine. He was the first president of Israel, and he was the man that won for the Jews the Balfour Declaration of November 1917, because he invented synthetic cordite for high explosives that Britain was very short of in the First World War. Here he is before the UN, preparing as they are to vote on the 29th of November 1947. Now, if you want to fix dates in your mind, that's one you need to have in your mind. The next one, of course, is the 14th of May 1948. Who knows what happens on the 14th of May 1948? Anyone? Yeah, the Declaration of the State of Israel, 14th of May 1948. Well, 29th of November in the year before, 1947, was when they took the vote, United Nations. Australia was the first nation to vote yes, and of course from that moment on, Australia began to be blessed. Canada too voted yes. Canada today has been blessed because the Prime Minister of Canada is a supporter of Israel. He shouldn't be in power, but he won the last election, probably against the odds. So did the United States of America, and America has been blessed ever since that time. But they had a leader at that time who did a lot for Israel, as we're going to see. When that resolution was put, the United Nations, in November 1947, it was passed 33 votes for the partition of the land into 2 sections, 13 against and 10 abstentions and 1 absentee. So Bible prophecy was being fulfilled. And our brethren and my mum and dad rejoiced. They rejoiced when they saw these things happening way back in 1947 and 48. They could see Bible prophecy being fulfilled before their eyes. Well, of course, Christ hasn't come in the period since then, but he's about to come. There's no question about that. But here's the man. Now, he became President of America because he was the Vice President under Franklin D. Roosevelt. When Roosevelt died after the election in 1944, in April 45, Truman became President, and he had nearly three and a half years to go on the presidency before the election of 1948. He was one of Israel's staunchest friends in the whole process of the declaration of the State of Israel on the 14th of May 1948. And here he is conferring with Abba Eban, who eventually became the Foreign Minister of Israel. He was the UN representative at the time, and with their first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, first Prime Minister of Israel. And there's Truman over here conferring with these two men prior to the events of 29th of November 1947. So listen to this. This is how Israel became a nation state in May 48.
Nations, the Jews announced their plans.
Not later than May 16th next, a provisional Jewish government will commence to function in cooperation with the representatives of the United Nations living in Palestine.
The Jewish leadership sought political support abroad.
Amerika התחבקה בנושא.
The U.S. State Department argued against it. Their first response was, no country, no state.
לא מנדט, לא מדינה.
Ben-Gurion sent his close colleague Moshe Sharett to convince the Americans to recognize the proposed Jewish state. Sharett tried to persuade Secretary of State George Marshall, who was totally opposed to the idea. But President Truman surprised everyone with his strong support.
I was told by all these so-called experts that it was done, it involved the whole Near East in a war, and it would also involve the United States. Hitler had been murdering Jews right and left. I saw it, and I dream about it even to this day. The Jews needed some place where they could go. It was my attitude that the American government couldn't stand idly by while the victims of Hitler's madness are not allowed to build new lives.
Marshall was worried that war would break out.
We are in the midst of a very critical situation. We should therefore carefully avoid approaching international problems on an emotional basis.
He wanted to maintain good relations with the Arabs. 2 days before the British left Palestine, Truman summoned Marshall to the White House. Clark Clifford was asked to support the case for a Jewish state.
General Marshall started off. The president listened attentively and then said, I would like now to hear from Clark. But as I spoke, I saw Marshall's face getting redder and redder. When I finished, he exploded.
Marshall accused Truman of a transparent dodge to win the Jewish vote.
Clark Clifford did not disguise the fact that Marshall was raging mad. They don't need a state, they don't deserve a state, it isn't theirs. They've stolen that land. These were Marshall's words.
He turned to the president, said, I'm obliged, Mr. President, to tell you that if you should adopt a policy that is recommended by Clifford, I would be unable to vote for you in this coming election in November. Well, dead silence in the room. No one had ever heard anything like it. I had never heard anybody threaten the President of the United States in that manner.
Before Marshall could go any further, Truman ended the meeting.
Now this is interesting, young people, because it was an election in November 1948, and Harry Truman should have lost it. All the polls were against him, and when the vote was taken and they did their first count, it looked as though he'd lost to Thomas Dewey. And so the papers came out. So the New York Times, Dewey defeats Truman. Well, next morning it was found out that Truman had defeated Dewey. So the New York Times and many other papers had egg on their face, big time. Well, how did that happen? Well, you see, here's the man who supported the state of Israel. It's true. I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee. It's been proven over and over again in history. So what has happened to the world's superpower policemen that got blessed post the events of the Second World War? Well, from the very early part of the 20th century, America was emerging as a huge power, became very prosperous and a dominant power in world affairs. And in 2 world wars, into which it had to be dragged, kicking and screaming, made it into the world's policeman. In 2014, America is a shell of its former self, bruised from many foreign adventures that it couldn't afford in defence of liberty, bankrupt from poor management at home, and close to collapse through the stupidity of American politics. It's about to fall over and to cease to have any real influence in the world. America has always been the reluctant ally of the British. I want to tell you a story about what happened in the First World War and how America was dragged into it kicking and screaming. They didn't want to come into the First World War. They didn't want to come into the Second World War either. But what brought them in? Well, because God had a purpose. He had a purpose and he needed the Americans to fulfill that. Now in 1915, after about 16 months of war, the British, who were fighting in France alongside the French against the Germans, had lost 1 million men, the cream, the flower of their youth. They were nearly bankrupt and they were short of high explosives. Now that's difficult to fight wars if you don't have high explosives for your cannon, etc., your bombs. Well, what are they going to do about that? Well, the cabinet was actually talking about seeking armistice terms with Germany. Now, armistice means you're seeking peace so the other side wins. At the end of the First World War, it was Germany who had to ask for armistice terms from the British and the French and the Americans. Now, if Britain had submitted in 1915, guess what wouldn't have happened, young people? There'd be no state of Israel. Britain would not have taken a mandate over the land of Palestine. The Turks would still be there. All right? The purpose of God fall flat on its face. Could that happen? No. So God had to get America into the First World War to shift the balance. He used Winston Churchill, who shouldn't have been there either. He should have been like Swiss cheese. He fought in the Boer War of 1901. His mates who escaped from prison with him in that war were shot to pieces. He survived. Why did he survive? Well, he survived because God needed him in 2 world wars. And he played a very important part in both of those world wars. He said to the cabinet, just give me time. And I'll drag the US into the war. You know what he did? He arranged for high explosives to be loaded aboard the British passenger ship, the Lusitania, in New York Harbour in 1915, May 1915, or April 15. Passages across the Atlantic were sold to unsuspecting Americans. In those days, you couldn't catch a plane to go across the Atlantic. You had to get on a ship, and it was a war, and the Atlantic was full of German U-boats. Well, they didn't attack passenger liners unless they were in some way involved with the war. So Churchill put high explosives on the lower decks of the Lusitania, and he made sure the German spies in New York knew about it. And they sold passages to Americans. So the German spies alerted their masters back in Germany, and Germany put ads in the papers in New York saying to Americans, don't be so foolish, don't buy tickets on the Lusitania. It's now a ship of war. But of course, the big papers didn't publish those ads, did they? Only 2 minor papers published those ads. So the message didn't get around. And the Lusitania sailed with its high explosives and a lot of passengers on the 1st of May 1915. It was given 1 cruiser to escort it across the Atlantic, which is ridiculous. And when they got to Scotland, Churchill called the cruiser off and said, go home. And then he ordered the Lusitania to slow down. Come on. Slow down? He knew there were German U-boats lurking in that area because the day before a British ship had been sunk by a U-boat. And so the Lusitania was torpedoed by a U-boat on Friday the 7th of May 1915 off Ireland. He knew they were there. He set this up. He wanted America in the war. Of the 1,195 of the 1,959 passengers on board drowned, including 128 Americans. So 128 Americans who weren't in the war went to the bottom of the ocean in the Lusitania. And the outrage that caused in America finally brought America into the war in early 1917. And so history changed. In the meantime, Chaim Weizmann, the Jew, in Manchester, England invented synthetic cordite or acetone. That solved Britain's problem of high explosives. The balance shifted in the First World War. And so the British pushed the Turks out of Palestine in November 1917. On the 2nd of November 1917, Lord James Balfour wrote the Balfour Declaration, seeking a homeland for the Jews. And all of that, of course, led ultimately to the State of Israel being formed. Well, when Obama came to office, he dumped Mr. Churchill because as a result of the events of the 11th of September 2001, when you know the Twin Towers came down, 9/11's just one of those things that flows off the tongue now, isn't it? 9/11. The result of those events, the British government sent to George Bush, who was the President of the US at the time, a bust that was in the British Museum of Winston Churchill. When Obama came to office, he sent it back. I don't want it. Not interested. And then declared that France was America's closest ally. What an idiot. What an idiot. Well, you know, he's actually basing it on history, young people. America's reluctance to come into World War II was because of the Depression. During the Depression years, there was a very strong anti-war movement led by Charles Lindbergh, the first man to fly an aircraft across the Atlantic and to land in France. He had his baby boy kidnapped. Did you know that? Killed. So fame and fortune doesn't always end up being very good. Anyway, he led this movement, and the United States of America strongly resisted coming into the Second World War until, of course, God had other ideas. He was happy to supply arms to Britain under the Lend-Lease scheme, which Britain took about 45 years to pay off, but refused to become involved in any military way at all. Only when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on Sunday the 7th of 1941 did President Roosevelt stand up in the Congress and declare war on both Japan and Germany. Now, guess who knew that the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor in December 1941? Winston Churchill. The British had broken the Japanese code. They knew the Japanese were heading to Pearl Harbor. Did Churchill pick up the phone and ring the President of America and say, "You'd better get your act together because the Japanese are going to bomb Pearl Harbor"? No, he wanted the Japanese to bomb Pearl Harbor. So America would be forced into the war. And that shifted the balance of the Second World War too, and brought about the creation of the State of Israel. See? God was at work. The Most High rules in the kingdom of men. That's for the living. That's what you, I think you're living, aren't you? You look like you're awake. That's for you, young people. So you know that God's in control. All right? That's what it's about. God's purpose required both interventions by America. But America, young people, is not a young lion. I want to talk about that. Prophecy of Ezekiel 38:13 says, Sheba and Dedan, the merchants of Tarshish, with all the young lions thereof, shall say unto Gog, have you come to take a spoil? We know that Tarshish can be identified with Britain. No question about that. And here's a First World War poster. Helped by the young lions. See these little guys here? Helped by the young lions, the old lion, Britain, defies his foes. Well, who are they? Well, Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand. And among the countries who survived the global financial crisis of 2008, the best were Australia, Canada, India and New Zealand. Coincidence? No. All have a British system of government, and three share the Queen as the titular head of state. But what about America? Well, history's going to be repeated, as it often is. The US will be sidelined by the Great Depression of the 21st century. It does not have a British system of government. It's French in many ways. The French won the War of Independence for America in 1783. And Brother Thomas, you can search his writings high and low. You will not find anything about America being a young lion in his writings or the writings of his fellow pioneers. You won't find anything. That idea arose in the mid-20th century. In fact, you will find a lot of unflattering things that Brother Thomas says about the American governmental system. And he found the truth in America. If there was any human pride in that, he would have said, oh yeah, America's a young lion. He says America's got a French government. And he's quite right. France entered the War of Independence in 1778, which is prior to the French Revolution. It bankrupted France. And it led to the events of the French Revolution. Because the French were putting so much money into the American War of Independence, they went bankrupt. They couldn't feed their own people. So the people rose up in the French Revolution. So it's cause and effect. Their very involvement in freeing the Americans from British control led to the dissolution of the monarchy in France. All right? The Battle of Yorktown on the James River in 1781 finally secured a US victory over the British. And America rewarded France by appointing a French finance minister in their first government, by adopting a French governmental system, presidential system, based on the French model, by celebrating Colonel Lafayette in both a park and a statue, and thousands of streets in America named Lafayette Street. You ever looked it up in Google? Lafayette Street. They've even got towns called Fayetteville in America. You ever been to the White House, young people? I've been there several times. You stand outside the White House and look across the road from the White House, what do you see? Lafayette Park. You turn just to the right, what do you see? A huge bronze statue to Colonel Lafayette. That's how much an important role he played in the scheme of things as far as the Americans are concerned. They accepted the Statue of Liberty from France. It was a gift from France. And they have a Frenchman design the diamond of Washington, D.C. You know, the Congress and the Washington Memorial and the White House. It's like a diamond. Yeah, a Frenchman designed that. I've got a photograph of his statue. America is essentially French. You don't talk French, do you? Your Canadian neighbours, they have to learn French, don't they? But they're more British than what you are. You speak the English language reasonably well, all right? Not perfectly, but reasonably well. But that's about the only thing that you have that comes from Britain. The rest is primarily French. You didn't know that, did you? All right? Well, that's why America is not a young lion. Colonel Lafayette lived from 1757 to 1834. He was a French aristocrat. He was in the upper classes. He became a military officer. But he was a revolutionary at heart, so he joined the American Revolution in the 1770s in his 20s. He influenced Louis XVI. Louis XVI was the last king of France. He had his head chopped off in 1793 by guillotine. All right? Through the French Revolution. Well, this guy influenced him to support the War of Independence, and that bankrupted France and brought about the French Revolution. He played a crucial role in many battles against the British on American soil, particularly the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. He convinced Louis XVI to issue the Edict of Tolerance for the Huguenots in France. And in 1787 and 1788, he convinced Louis XVI to form what's called the Estates General. If you read Eureka, it'll tell you all about that. It'll tell you how the Estates General, when it met with its three different groups in France, led ultimately to the French Revolution in 1789. So you see how influential this guy was. That's why he's so famous. And he played a prominent part in the French Revolution thereafter. He became the head of the French Lagarde. He got put in jail by the Jacobins, but Napoleon released him. He became a very prominent man in the days of Napoleon. So he's no ordinary character, is Mr. Lafayette, which is why there are thousands of streets in America named after him. But what about you, young people? Well, this thing we know, that in Bible prophecy, God has a place for you. We've talked about America. I want to talk briefly now about where you sit in the scheme of things. We read in Psalm 68 verses 5 to 10, and we won't go there for the sake of time. But in the act of judgment, and that psalm's all about the march of the rainbowed angel. Yahweh cares for the fatherless and the widow. He puts the solitary in families. We know from Isaiah 40, which I will take you to. Isaiah chapter 40, verses 9 to 11, which clearly in the context, if you look at it carefully, is about Christ's second advent. It says in Isaiah chapter 40 and in verses 9 and 10 that he's coming and his reward is with him and his work is before him, young people. This is about his second advent. And then you read this in verse 11 of Isaiah chapter 40. It says, he shall feed his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather the lambs with his arm. And these are not four-legged ones. These are two-legged lambs. He's talking about children, young children. And it goes on to say, and he shall carry them in his bosom and shall gently lead those that are with young. Babies just born, babies still in the womb. When Christ comes to take his servants to the place of judgment, their families, their children are going with them to that place of judgment. And if Christ comes when I think he's going to come, there's going to be quite a few of you sitting in this room who will not have reached the age where you can be held responsible, not at a point where you can justifiably be baptised. Some of you will be in that position. Someone's got to be caught in that position, don't they? Well, it wasn't me. Look at me now. But I used to be like you once. Right? But Christ didn't come when I was a teenager. He might well come when you're teenagers. So where do you sit in the scheme of things? Well, God has a plan. Ezekiel 47, verses 22 and 23, which some of you have heard me talk about before. He has a plan for those who are in that position. Providing, of course, they're attempting to do the right thing. Providing they're not kicking against their parents. Providing they don't want the world. God has a plan for young people like that. And it's here in Ezekiel 47, verses 22 and 23. It shall come to pass that you shall divide it by lot for an inheritance unto you and to the strangers that sojourn among you, which shall beget children among you. This is the division of the land for the tribes of Israel. But they're not going to be alone. They're going to be a group called the strangers that sojourn among the children of Israel and that beget children. So the first thing we know is that they're Gentiles. They weren't born Jews. The second thing we know is that they are mortals, because immortals don't have children. All right, so they're mortal. They have their own families. The next thing we know is they sojourn. They're only there for a time because they are going to die eventually. All right, now let's just step back. They're counted as Israelites. They're counted as being born in the country among the children of Israel. But there's something that is even more spectacular than that fact. It is this. And it shall come to pass that in what tribe the stranger sojourneth, there shall ye give him his inheritance, saith Adonai Yahweh. Now that is not something that the Jews will be able to do. Here's the land divided, young people, from Dan in the north to Gad in the south. There are 7 tribes above and 5 beneath. 7's the number of the Abrahamic covenant, 5's the number of grace. You inherit in this land, you get in there because of your faith in the Abrahamic promises by divine grace. You'll be given an inheritance. And there'll be some of you sitting in this room that are going to go through this, hopefully all of you, or at least many of you. You'll find an inheritance somewhere amongst the 7 tribes to the north or the 5 tribes to the south. But if you belong to the tribe of Dan and you're a Jew, that's where you stay. If you belong to Judah, that's where you stay. But not this class of people. This class of people are extremely privileged to be able to choose anywhere in the land that they want to establish their home and build their family. Now I can't take you because of time to Isaiah 20, but I just want you to have a look at this little chart here, a timeline for the time that we go to the judgment seat. There will be a 1-year judgment period, followed by a 1-year rejoicing period to fulfill Deuteronomy 24 verse 5. Then there will be a 4 to 5 year preparation period for the saints, and then a 3.5 year period before Armageddon, when the saints will go out. Many will go with Elijah to tell the Jews that they're about to receive the sign of Armageddon. It's called the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. All right? I won't go into any of those details right now because this is the chart I want to finish on. It's a timeline for Christadelphian teenagers and children. So let us say Christ does come in late 2014. Let's just say that happens. Where does that put you sitting in this room today? He finds a group of unbaptised teenagers, most of whom are trying to do the right thing. All right? Where does it put you? Well, a 15-year-old teenager will be 16 years old when its parents are immortalised. He'll be age 25 at Armageddon. Age 75 at the opening of the temple for worship. So here he is, 15-year-old, resurrection. 25 at the time of Armageddon. Now, sometime, of course, in this period, after Armageddon, they'll be taken to the land. Sometime in this period, they'll marry. Whether that be a Jew or Jewess, whether it be, of course, one of your own compatriot Christadelphians, time will tell. And that teenager will be 75. Well, I'm not even 75 now. That teenager will be 75 when the temple is open for worship. He'll have a family of his own, his or her own, and a place in the land of Israel. And your parents will come and see you, and your kids, and their kids. And that'll go on for hundreds of years, because mortals in the land, and probably throughout the whole earth, will live for hundreds of years in the kingdom age. And then you'll die and be resurrected at the end of the 1,000 years. And if you've done the right thing, immortalised. So you know what that means, young people? It's not a disaster for you if you're trying to do the right thing and Christ comes before you get an opportunity to do what your parents have done and obey the truth. In baptism, it's not a disaster. It just means you've got to wait 1,000 years longer. That's all. That 1,000 years is nothing for someone who lives for 600, 700, 800 years, eh? Like Methuselah, nothing. When you're not unhealthy, unwell, and you don't suffer the sicknesses, the diseases, and the idiocy of the world we live in today. All right? That's a pretty good thing, isn't it? So young people, value your heritage. You are the most privileged young people on the face of the earth. Did you know that? Value your heritage.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Uncle Jim. We're going to ask Uncle Len to close with prayer and to pray for our lunch.
Our loving Heavenly Father, we come before Thee and thank Thee for this time that we have had to be around Thy Word, to learn the lessons that Thou hast set forth for us, that we may know and understand that Thy plan and purpose has been going on for a very long time, and is being fulfilled as we stand before Thee. And it is good to know that we have a place in that plan, that we may do what is right and pleasing in Thy sight, so that we may be ready for Thy Son's return. We thank Thee for all that we have, especially Thy Word and Thy Son. And we thank Thee for the ability that we have to learn and understand these things that are before us. Guide and direct us to that end, and help us to be ready. And when the peace of Jerusalem comes, we will be fit vessels and ready for Thy service. We thank Thee now for this food, Father, that Thou hast provided, that will physically nourish us and help us to be strengthened, so that we may be ready to take in the spiritual food that Thou gives us every day. We thank Thee for all these things and ask that Thou would be with us and guide us and direct us in all things as we come before Thee. In His name, our Lord Jesus the Christ. Amen.
So, if you got the pizza lunch, we have it set up back there. We'll have your plates and everything. You can go ahead and line up, and if not, the food is right over there.
Thank you, Uncle Jim. Thank you, Uncle Jim.